What is up, YouTube? Thank you for joining me this evening. We've got a good topic for this evening. It's data logging. And now this is not going to be a comprehensive course on data logging. I'm going to do some more detailed videos that are going to probably be a better reference. This is a good opportunity for me, guys, to give you a real quick rundown. And we're mostly going to focus on reading logs and how you can obviously, we even offer trackside support, but we can't look at every log. We can't be there every time you race. So I think it's a good idea to be able to look at logs and interpret them and understand what's going on with your car, especially if you feel like you have a problem and you can't get in touch with us. You can look at the log and maybe, make up some, decisions on whether you should run the car more or what possibly the problem could be. So anyway, sorry, is my mic good? That seemed a little low. All right. Sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure if you could hear me well or not. Hopefully you can now. So who do we got in here tonight? We got Mark, Daniel, what's up? Craig Bill, always in the house. Ants 19 Coyote, what's up? Nitrous and Bias Plies, how's it going? John Bailey, how's it going? Juan, what's up? South Texas in the house. Nitrous, what's up? Hey, love, what's going on? Mark, fuel injector duty cycle. You cannot log that. You can calculate that, though. That's not really part of what I was going to go over tonight, but if you stick around and when we get into more of the question and answer section, you can ask that, and I can explain it. You can log pulse width on most things, but we're going to go over what you can log, how you can log it, and all those sorts of things. What's up? Good evening. All right, Jason, 10-second PBD truck in the house. What's going on? Magnolia Bloom says we hear you great. Gith in the house. What's up? All right, guys. So we're going to get right into it because this could probably be a really long video. So I want to just touch on the basics, and then from there we'll open it up to some questions. But there's some key parts to data logging and exactly the process you go through to get to that point that I hopefully, after I explain some things, it'll make it a little easier for you guys to work on the other end of a remote tune. So the first thing is, obviously, there's multiple ways to data log. You have, there's tons of companies, but we kind of focus on, obviously, HP tuners and SCT around here. And then SCT, you can log with a laptop or with the device. And HP tuners, you can log with a laptop or they actually support on-device logging just by itself. Obviously, you don't have a screen for that, and you can auto-trigger it or hit the button. We're not going to get into that. That'll be like a more advanced topic, and I have used that before, although I did switch back to laptop because in my mind, I just wanted to be able to visually confirm that the log was started. And then you've also got TDN where you can log with your phone, or I guess a tablet if you really wanted to. So we're going to mostly cover HP tuners, but I want to go over both of those. So I went ahead and downloaded HP tuners brand new to this computer so you guys can see exactly what you get when you first open it up. So I turned the Mustang trail or the mouse trails on. Hopefully you guys can see my mouse pretty well. So I want to go over what all this is. And first, the real basics of logging, like just how to set it up. And then we're going to go more into reading logs. So up here is you've got two cars, one on the left and one on the right. So the one on the left, that'll connect to the car. And the one on the right, if you're connected, will disconnect from the car. This is a really important button to know because if you're using something like RTD Flasher, if you're logging with this and you're connected and then you go to flash the car, it'll tell you it can't communicate. And unfortunately, it's not smart enough to tell you, hey, dummy, you're connected with VCM scanner. So you have to kind of know that, of course. So anytime you go to connect with like RTD flasher and it's not working, obviously check your VCM scanner and make sure you're not connected. Obviously the red button, as you might guess, is record, and right next to that is a square gray button. That is to stop the log. Now, one cool thing about HP tuners is every single time you log, that is going to be on your computer, whether you save it or not, unless, of course, you delete it on purpose. So in the case where you stop a log and then somehow, I have touchscreen computers. I've gone to grab the laptop and accidentally hit the screen and closed HP tuners. And I'm like, oh, no, log. But with HP tuners, it's going to be in your documents folder under the HP tuners folder, BCM scanner, and then logs, something like that. And it's just by date. Obviously, it's auto-save, so it's date. You can usually find something pretty easily. I mean, I even find things in there that I need that, I'm logging cars constantly. So if you're only doing your car, it should be pretty straightforward if you need to find a log in there. So that's a good tip. Some other buttons that are important up here are the engine for checking codes. And of course, like I said, we're going to do a much more detailed video on this where I can kind of plan it out. This is just more, casual, and I'm not connected to a car, so I can't do any of the functions that I'm talking about here. We're going to concentrate tonight on reading logs, but I just wanted to show you around a little bit. Over here to the left is going to be your channels. Right here, it says it actually at the top, channels. In this case, channels means parameters, what you're going to log. And I want to make a quick comment about that because this is an important thing to understand, especially with the way HP Tuners works. We see a lot of people make this mistake, and I've seen people, that do it a lot make this mistake, not realizing what they're doing. So you have two basic types of things that you're logging on this, and you have PIDs, and the ones that say SAE next to them are definitely PIDs, but that doesn't mean that's the only ones that are PIDs. So a PID is more of a universal address that's going to work across multiple. SAE ones will work across multiple brands and everything, and then there's Ford PIDs. The Ford PIDs may only work on Fords, but they're going to work across different years or strategies. So it's really important for everybody to understand a little bit about what we're talking about. I don't want to dive too deep here, but strategy or operating system, or there's different things people, call it, but I'll call it strategy. So the strategy is the operating system that your vehicle is running on, basically. And that could change between two different cars, same year and everything. Also, strategies will change when you get an update from the dealer, and basically, it's expressed different ways. But sometimes it's a 7-digit code, and sometimes it looks more like a part number. But either one usually works for what you need, and that is super important when you're logging, especially when you're logging within HP tuners. Like I said, I see this all the time, but a lot of tuners, including us, often scramble the operating system ID. So why is that important? Well, it's important when you're logging because the operating system ID tells the logger exactly what operating system you're on. So why is that important? Well, beyond PIDs, there's a thing called DMRs, right? Which are data logging parameters that are specific to the strategy you're on. Not that you can only log that parameter on that strategy, but the address on where to read that value is going to be different strategy to strategy. So a PID, which we'll use SAE PIDs for an example. And here at the top, you've got engine RPM and it says SAE. So that is going to work. If you hook this up to practically anything newer, it's going to read all the ones that say SAE. But let's say for some reason you wanted to use the DMR, right, for engine RPM. Why would you want to do that first off? Well, it's faster usually. If you've ever noticed, update rates on SAE PIDs are usually a lot slower than either a Ford PID or the DMR. And there's a lot of key things that are important when we're talking about the update rate and what affects that, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But anyway, so the operating system of your vehicle is fairly important because when the logger hooks up to it, it needs this information to read a lot of the real specific types of things we log, right? Not necessarily this stuff, because you could always log the SAE stuff, and although the update rate may be slower, it still will work. But let's do this. Where do we get this list of channels? Well, you can make it up yourself, which once you connect to the vehicle, then you go in here to this box here, but you can't, vehicle menu. Let's do that real quick. Should have done this ahead of time, I suppose. So that's like a 7-digit code. I don't know if this is going to work, but this is kind of, yep. Okay, so once you hit that plus button up there, now you can add any parameter that HP Tuners has in here to log, you can add it. So the first question might be, why don't I just add all this stuff? Well, you only have so much bandwidth for the computer to transmit that data to you. So that's a fixed amount. So the more that you log, the less resolution you're going to get. And some parameters have priority over others as far as update rate. But if you've ever had a log where, let's say it was something like, I see this a lot like an output shaft speed on 10-speed cars. If you're logging too many things, the output shaft speed should look just like the RPM trace and go up as the car speeds up. But you'll get like a stair step where it's just updating like every second or so. And that's because we're logging too many things. And sometimes the channels file that we give you will be this way. And I'll tell you the strategy behind that when you're logging a lot of things. It may not seem optimal, but I'll tell you why we do it that way. Anyway, so from here, after hitting the plus button, you can go in here and add all your own stuff. Now, because you saw me enter in that strategy in the vehicle the vehicle profile, which we're going to go over that's very important for you guys. Because I did that, and that happens to be a 2011 Mustang GT, my car, that's why I know it so easily. So this is going to give you all sorts of extra stuff, right? Because it knows the strategy of the vehicle, which I typed in. Whereas things like all these torque numbers, trying to think of what else would be in here. Probably a lot of throttle stuff. Here, throttle. Yeah, like right here, manifold vacuum ETC model. That's probably strategy specific. So why am I telling you this? Because when we send a tune out, or other tuners send it to anybody almost these days, the strategy is scrambled. So if you have a channels file, which we'll do that first. Let's open a channels file. Up here in the upper left, you've got the folder, open channel config, and I saved one on here. Where is it? I thought it would go right to the folder. Of course not. There it is. So this is something we might send for GT500. It's got clutch temp and clutch slip and clutch pressure and, you know, things that we have deemed important, at least at first glance, on a GT500. So where do you get these files? Those files come from us. So if you're a customer of ours, we send you the file that we're looking for you to do. But here's where the problem comes in with the strategy. So if your strategies, I've had this happen a lot, so listen up. If the strategy is scrambled, which all of ours are for the most part, or most tuners are, if you just, I've seen people, to fix that, first off, if you don't have the if you don't do anything special and it's scrambled, if you see a lot of this stuff is grayed out, what happens is it doesn't know what the strategy of the vehicle is because it's scrambled. So then once you go to start logging, it doesn't log that stuff because it doesn't know where to find it, because I told you DMRs, which are the ones that are going to probably show up in gray in this case, are strategy specific. So if it doesn't know the strategy, it doesn't know what to log. So to fix that, you go up to vehicle profiles, and you guys just saw me do this, which I made a fake one just so this would work, which I didn't know you can do. Pretty cool. Anyway, so what you would do is after you first connect to you connect to your vehicle and then disconnect from it, which is weird. You have to be disconnected to modify the vehicle profiles. So you connect to it so it can grab your VIN and all that. And then once you do that, you go in here and then you go to vehicle profile editor. And then over here on the left, you'll see your VIN. So make sure you're right now, there's no VIN there because it's like a fake profile just so you can use it on a desktop. You'll see a VIN. So you click on that one, and then over here on user OS, now in this case, it's giving me an opportunity for a TCM or an ECM. Stands for engine control module and transmission control module. Even on a GT500, which has a separate TCM, that is not scrambled, so you don't have to mess with that. But you do have to mess with the ECM one. So you put the proper strategy in there. So where people make the big mistake is they think this is some sort of unlock code and like, oh, this strategy scrambled. Give me that code from that other car. The chance of that working is pretty low. On a GT500, I mean, it's a crapshoot. You know, there's not that many strategies on a GT500 out there. Maybe 10 or 20, maybe, and most people are on just a few different ones. So you could kind of guess through those maybe. But for the most part, if you put a strategy in here, it's going to look at the address for that strategy for those parameters. So if it's going to a certain address to look for a parameter, but you have the wrong strategy, which gives you the wrong address, all the numbers over on the left side over here are all going to be just goofy looking, you know? So, and this is a really good time saver for you guys that are on the remote tuning side of things, is look at the data. You know, look at the numbers. Now, you don't have to be an expert to know that RPM is never negative 35,000 or something like that, right? So if all the numbers look a little weird to you, check with us, because I've seen people do this, the strategy's wrong, they didn't do the user OS correctly, and then what happens is we get a log back and it's mostly garbage because all the numbers are wrong because the strategy was wrong, so nothing's logging right. So, and that's partly why I want to teach you guys how to read a data log this evening, because, you know, a couple people ask me, you know, are you sure you want to do that? Where other companies are like trying to keep people from reading logs. I kind of want my customers to be somewhat educated. It saves me some time. It helps you guys keep your car safe. And maybe you don't need to ask us if it's what can be a fairly basic question that we can address on a night like tonight. So what else? One other thing. Well, we'll go over that in a minute, which is the layout. This layout over here is going to be important to me when I'm looking at logs. I've seen people do it different ways, whatever, but I'll show you the way I do it. But first, let's look at the other software that you guys might use. So this is SCT's Live Link. It's actually very, very good and very, very powerful. It's just the HP tuners. I like the flow of it a little bit better, but this really does work well. The way this works is up here you have the COM button, which means that's for communications, but that's to connect, right? So you go over here and then you hit check communications. Now, obviously this isn't going to work. The key has to be on. So I think if you go here, you can create a configuration file, which is just like a channels file, except on HP tuners, the channels file is an XML file. On LiveLink, it's a CF4 file. So if you click guide me and then you say you want to create a configuration file, you can say the vehicle is not available. And I wanted to show you this, right? So in real life, if you hit that COM button, hit check communication, and then it does talk to the vehicle, then you'll get to this point. So this point is somewhat like the vehicle profiles that I just showed you on HP Tuners, except this is where the strategy would go. So if for some reason it can't identify the vehicle the same way that you put the strategy in the vehicle profile on HP Tuners, you put that here, FSDL5. The last 2 digits aren't that important. I don't know what AA is. I think that's an actual code, but most strategies are the first 5 are the important ones. You can also change communication profiles. Obviously, this is all important, and it does that automatically. Don't mess with that. So once you do that, then it gets into this is similar to the pop-up window on HP Tuners that shows you all that stuff. I mean, so there's a lot of parallels here. So this would be all the things you can log. Obviously, most people aren't going to go through all this. It's a lot. So one interesting thing I see is it didn't load the DMRs, which I would have thought it would have. But, okay, no big deal. That's not what this is about. What's important is you're going to be using a config file just like we do a channels file on HP Tuners. You go up here to the top. That's config for chart gauges. Sorry, I don't use this very often. No, that's right. Load config. So merge items from configuration file with current list available. For the most part, most of you guys would want to say no there. I don't know if I actually grabbed a config file for SCT. I did not. Sorry about that, guys. But the important part is once that loads in, that's going to give you the predetermined list of parameters that we want to see, and then you're going to log, okay? And then over here is where you're going to see item name would be all the list, the text list with the numbers, and then up top is the graph. So let's go back to HP Tuners, and we're going to open a log. Actually, you know what? Let's look and see who's in here. Wow, we got a lot of people in here. We got Pablo, Chris M, Eric, what's up? Oh, we got Pedro, troublemaker in the house. He's here to start trouble. I'm going to block him just because he doesn't want to be blocked. Mr. Draggy, Kelly Aiken in the house. What's up? ProCharge Beast, how's it going? Abel Garcia, we got that's one of our NA guys from South Texas. All right. Who else we got here? Oh. Billy Jack, what's up? You didn't miss anything too much yet. JMS Performance, what's up? Kobe, Kobe's answering questions. Carlos says, just texted you, sorry. That's all right, brother. UCal stuff. UCal we can go over. Just hit us up directly because we're not really doing that much anymore. He said a P050A and he would just turn it off. I'll have to look that up. Brian, what's up? All right, so we'll go over some more questions later. I just want to make sure there's nothing important there. So what we're going to do now is, first off, let's talk about the layout in HP Tuners. You've got over here on the left, well, actually, it'd be easier if I just open the log. So I grabbed a couple logs here that are either interesting logs or from something cool, maybe. So the first log we'll look at is, we'll look at my 766 pass in my 6R80 car. I knew where that was. So one thing to remember on this is if you're a real serious racer, this is just the beginning, right? So on my car, this car, I was logging with HP Tuners, but I was also logging a ton of different sensors. I had an AIM dash in the car, which was also a data logger, and I was logging converter pressure and all sorts of different pressures and temperature sensors all over the place to try and help give me an advantage. And, you know, I think it helps. But This log right here is going to show you the basics because we don't log. This is a Gen 1. I'm not logging as much. It looks like I was logging variable cam timing, even though that was locked cams. But we'll go over that in just a second. So the first thing to look at is on the left here. I've seen people only use this, and I don't know how, but they do, right? So you can drag through the bottom. So at the bottom here, yeah, you guys can see that. At the bottom, you can drag through, and then over here to the left, this is a default layout. So problem number one, when you look at this default layout, is this red line is RPM, right? And then just disappears into nowhere land. HP tuners, unfortunately, on this stuff, it's not auto scaling, right? So even if you set this up to be how you want it to be, every once in a while, you still need to know how to change it. We'll go over that in a second. So down here at the bottom, though, are all your graphs. So it's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This default layout has 5 different graphs, which are all locked in time, of course. They just separate them so it's easier to see what's going on. Otherwise, we'll compare it actually. We'll do some comparisons here with SCT. One thing about this stuff is I don't use this to look at SCT data logs or any CSV data logs. But this is probably what you guys are going to use. I use something called Megalog Viewer, which helps be a little bit more like HP tuners, because right here, when you look at this, it's like, oh my God, right? And that's because this log actually wasn't even taken with SCT now that I look at what it is. I don't think. Maybe. Yeah, no, it was. So, so with this, it's like really hard to check what's going on. Now, obviously, you can easily turn on and off the different things. This has a bunch of analog inputs which aren't being used, which is creating a lot of extra noise on the screen there. So that's still a little bit easier to look at, but you still have quite a few parameters there over here that are all being graphed the same, whereas in HP tuners, you can separate those out as much as you want. Again, this is the default layout. I'm going to load one of my layouts here in a second to show you the difference. And then up here in the top middle, you have gauges, which, again, you have full control over these and how to lay them out. It's a little clunky to use, but it works. And if you spend the time, it works nicely. And then over here to the right is histogram stuff, which we're not going to get into histograms. Histograms could be extremely useful in the tuning process, but and they could be useful for quick troubleshooting because it can really, if you set them up correctly, it can identify issues with your tune-up. This is basically showing me spark advance. It's over the whole run based on like actual spark advance based on manifold pressure, which it's only scaled to atmosphere. So it's not 100% accurate, and it does averaging and everything. So histograms have their place, but that's not going to be part of this topic. So I'll go ahead and open one of the layouts I use. All right, so as you can see, I have expanded gauges, get rid of the histograms. They're still there over here. You can have tabs across the top. And then we've got RPM, we've got boost, we've got speed over here to the left. We've got cam, fuel pressure across the bottom here. We have spark and pedal and throttle and desired load and load. And all these across the top here, these bars are knock. And some vehicles use individual knock control and some use global. So this is for individual knock. Over here to the right is lambda, air-fuel ratio, basically, on those two. And you've got coolant temp and air temp and fuel trims, and that's about it on this. And then over here on the graphs at the bottom, and some of this is just left over from, I just took other ones and modified them. None of these are perfect. None of these work exactly how I want. There's definitely some downfalls with setting up a VCM scanner as far as when you set it up for certain ways, it will actually average between two different values if it sees two values for the same sensor. That's way beyond what we're talking about here. It's complicated. But just always know, if you're looking through data, always look at the number if you're unsure of what's going on. If you look at any of these graphs or any of the graphical representation in the gauges, sometimes there's some math being done there that's not accurate, and I won't go into why. So anyway, let's take a look at this. So, what are you looking for in a data log to begin with? Like I said, this was 760 pass with my red car. So you've got multiple things you want to check. As an end user where you're not tuning the car yourself, obviously you want to make sure your air-fuel ratio is good. If you're logging fuel pressure, which a Gen 1 does not have fuel pressure, that I did log fuel pressure, but that was on the other logger that I talked about, and I didn't want to cloud the whole deal here with showing you that. That's not that important for tonight. Anybody that wants to do that advanced data logging, you can give us a call and we can help you out with that. So anyway, looking at this log, right here, I left at 4,100 RPM. Boost is not reading correctly on this, but it was only at 1.16 engine load, which is not very much boost at all, like a few pounds. And then you're going to follow the red line, right? That's, as you can see here at the top, which I'm going to make the gauges a little smaller so you can see this better. At the top, the most important things I'm looking at, which actually for right now, I'm going to get rid of one of them. So we're looking at the red line, which is RPM, and then the green line, which is speed. So I told you earlier how, a lot of times you'll have to adjust this because it depends on what you're working on. In this case, I went 170 something miles an hour. So if I bring this up, after I right-clicked on that, I just go to speed and then max. I'll just make that 180. And then boom, now the green line is visible the whole way. So do I need to see the top of mile per hour? No, not really. So, you can make some real quick interpretations here as to what's going on. And like I said, this is a little bit of a simpler setup. This is my Gen 1 with lock camshafts. But, I launched at 4,100. It short shifted the 1.2, which is somewhat on purpose. It kind of almost uses that as one big gear if you look at it. That's kind of the strategy there, and it worked out well on this one. Then the 2.3 is at 8,300 RPM. 3.4 was at 8,400. This is short shifting a little bit, and then I ran it out the back door. So on this setup, I don't think I was even running knock sensors at this point. No, yep, it was running knock sensors, but I don't have it ever add knock. It never knocked. Oh, it did see a little knock. So over here, in this case, you can see knock retard. This is like one of the biggest things I wanted to address here on this video, since we were talking about data logging. There are multiple knock retard parameters to log. Why is that a problem? Well, because they sometimes read differently. So there's this one called knock retard. There's another one called knock modifier, which actually Eric at HP Tuners or whoever worked on it put like a decoder basically. The problem is there's confusion sometimes as to negative and positive knock retard, right? So in this case, this is going to show you, take it literally, knock retard, right? So if they were active actually as I was coming up on the trans break. So -2, if this parameter is called knock retard, but it's negative, then it's not retard, it's adding it, right? So negative in this case is adding it. And then as you go through the run, I should have this map to one of, I don't have the right lay out exactly for this car. But this should be mapped up here in the gauges, so it's super easy for me to pick knockout. As I'm scrolling through, I'll see one of these gauges go up, and we'll go over that on one of the next logs. But so, the knock sensor, as I'm dragging through it, 0.8, it just saw just a little tippy tap and knock there. Whether that's real or not, who knows, right? But that's one of the things you're going to want to check on your log. Now, how much knock is too much knock? Well, it kind of depends, what combination you're running, what type of fuel you're running. One or two excursions here or there, I call them, I wouldn't worry an incredible amount about it. But if it's knocking the same amount at the same time, at the same RPM, the same conditions over and over and over again, I would look at that. Sometimes, the knock sensor will hear something that it'll never hear again. So you can't just jump every time you see that number move. Now, if it's excessive, I was 0.8, so, whatever. But if that's at 8, we'd be in big problems there. So what other things are you going to look at on the log? Well, you want to look at your air-fuel ratio and your fuel trims. The fuel trims are more important to look at than the actual air-fuel ratio. Why is that? Well, in most cases, when you're going down the track, you're in what's called closed loop. So the computer is calculating the amount of fuel you need and then putting that fuel in and then measuring it, which your wideband sensor tells. And then based on what it's seeing versus what it commands, it's going to take away or add fuel to target exactly what you're asking for. So why are the fuel trims important? Well, sometimes the fuel trims stop working. So if your tune is set up and it's adding, say, 8 or 10% of fuel the whole way down the track, and you have some sort of issue which forces the car to go open loop, which means no longer getting fuel correction, you lose that 8% fuel correction. So now your car is 8% lean in that case, or more, depending on how much fuel correction. A lot of Coyotes blew up in the early 2011, 2012, all that, when people really didn't get a handle of exactly how all this worked. They were looking at air-fuel ratio, lambda, whatever you'd like to call it, and, oh, yeah, the fuel's perfect. It's like, yeah, but it's adding 10%. So, and, in what cases can it turn off closed loop? Well, if one of your wide bands is bad, oftentimes it's going to go open loop at wide open. The other one will still read correctly, but it will stop doing fuel correction. So looking at this as an example, so if you can, there's a couple things you can look at here. First, let's keep on fuel. So it looks like, who knows, I don't want to open the tune right now, but I was probably commanding like 7.8, 7.9 lambda. It's seeing about that the whole way down the track. But if you look over here to the right, it's pulling 6 and 7% bank to bank. Well, what would happen if I went and took that fuel out of the tune? You might say, oh, well, it's already at your commanded air fuel ratio, so it's probably not going to change anything. It will, because it's having to correct to get to that point. So at some point, it was too rich, and then it corrected. See, 7.7, oh, correct. So while I have no problem leaving the car this way, this is my car, getting the fuel trims a little closer than this could be beneficial. But in most cases, I don't mind seeing a 2 to 4, 5% negative correction, because at that point, if we have a wideband failure, it's only going to be on the rich side, right? Not the lean side. If you have 4 to 5% positive correction at watt, that could be a problem. And I'm not saying none of the tunes we've ever done haven't been that way. But, if it is that way, now and you can hit us up and go, hey, my car's trimming a little bit lean. When I say a car's trimming lean, that means to me that it's running the right air-fuel ratio once everything is correcting, but it's on the lean side and it's trimming to get the fuel back into it. So that's the terminology that I'm using there. Some other things you can look at on these logs is air load, engine load. I have it labeled as load here in the middle on this graph. On the left here, it's called air load. You can make these say whatever you want on the graphs at the top. So, you know, this whole way down the track, it's seeing 2930 load. So, you know, this isn't always 100% accurate, but it's a good gauge as to how much boost you're running. So realistically, you know, you could almost think of this as atmospheres. So 1.0 would just be NA, 2.0 maybe 14 pounds of boost, 3.0 28 pounds of boost, and that's probably very accurate as to what I was running here. And then along the bottom, you can see the timing curve, which it looks like I was running 19, 20 degrees of timing pretty much the whole way. This was not a high compression deal. It was lower compression. It probably could have taken more timing. I probably could have leaned it out. I probably could have done a lot of things with this, but unfortunately after this, I went to Mod Nats and we did a wheelie and messed the car up a little bit and then took it down to redo it. So those are the real basics that you're looking at. And one other very important thing you can look at is throttle, right? This, for some reason, I'd have to look. This could be one of the cases that I was telling you about. This is a perfect example. Under throttle percentage, for some reason it's reading 63 over here, but if you look up here, it says 100, right? Because there's multiple things that I'm logging, and you know, this could be cleaned up probably, but it's not. So throttle position's at 100. Relative throttle position, which is the SAE parameter, which sometimes can be goofy, is showing 62. So that's what this green number is here. So that should really be changed in this layout to the correct one. But the most important part is looking at the graph, which is the green line across. The graph, looking at things in graph and gauges, to me, is the easiest way to identify an issue very, very quickly. Even this graph shows you the combined long and short-term fuel trims, which is this yellow line going here. So it's going down, right? So it's pulling fuel, pulling fuel, pulling fuel, pulling fuel. So now all of a sudden, if this line started going up, it's easily visually to realize that you're leaning out as you're going down the track. Let's see. We'll look at one other log in here, and then I'll see if you guys have any questions. We'll look at an actual GT500 log. How about that? This is a very long time ago. This is my 9.0 at like 156 in my GT500 when it was stock blower, I believe. Now this log has some issues. A GT500 log with some issues. Go figure. All right, so as I told you earlier, the red line is RPM. So we'll look at that and follow it down the track. You got RPM and mile per hour. First off, we're logging a few more things are showing up here than were showing up on the red car. In the upper right below coolant temperature, you've got MCT, which is your manifold charge temp, and I suppose at this point I had an ice box because it's at 60. On the left, you're actually getting some cam values over here. Let's see. You're going to get an actual boost value because those are map sensor based. And everything else is pretty much the same. And you'll also be able to see knock here across the top if there was any on this run, which maybe. I don't know. We'll find out together. So here you can see I launched at 3,200, which, you know, we launch higher than that now on some cars. And then you can see the clutch flared up to 38 and pulled it back down to 31. And then, boom, you're going through the gears. So the nice thing is you can zoom in and out with your mouse. So first, let's look at the shift points. 1.2 was at 82. 2.3 was at 83, almost 84. And then this one was at 82, which those are all kind of low, actually. Maybe if I would have shifted where I was supposed to, it would have went faster than a 903 and got that 8, but who knows? So that looks all good. But one thing you'll notice is up here in the on the lambda or air fuel ratio. And for those of you guys that don't know, lambda is really what I rather talk in, but air fuel ratio makes sense to more people. But basically, Lambda is expressed in a value of 1, and then, 0.78 would be enriched in that direction, and then above 1 would be, above stoic with, on the gasoline scale, 14.6 is 1.0 equivalent of lambda. So, on this setup, on a GT 500 that I'm pushing, I don't know. Back then, I think I was running it a little bit richer, maybe 0.79. I'll go 0.8, 0.81 on some cars. They're low compression engines. Anyway, but what you can see here is dragging through it is this right wideband over here is going in and out. So boom, that's one way that you guys can identify a problem in your own vehicle now, is if you're having an issue, then that you're going to lose the reading, and that's what happens. See, it goes to 0 and then comes back and goes to 0, and it is probably having issues with its heater. Now, I actually did look at this log ahead of time because I realized that this dash was set up wrong, and what it was doing, I'll show you real quick. If you go, so all this stuff here is, oh wait, no, that's wrong. That's for the chart. Gauges layout. So up here, they're in two different spots for some reason. But you have wideband bank 1 and wideband bank 2. Before, they were set up as, so this is complicated, but it's important. HB Tuners has some things built in to make it easier for you. So instead of logging an exact parameter, you're kind of logging like a group of parameters, meaning that way you don't have to set the dash up differently every single vehicle you touch. It's like a more universal term for wideband. And that's what it was logging. It's called, when you go to try to pick an individual parameter, it tries to convince you to do it a different way. Say no, in this case. Because what happens is then it's using multiple values that might be in your channels list. And if it loses the one channel, it starts averaging between them. And then all of a sudden, you're not getting accurate data up here on your graphs. It's always going to be accurate over here on the channels list in text, but the graphing down here, or the gauges and the graphing, will not be correct depending on how you set that up. So again, it's too complicated pretty much to bring up here, but I just wanted to let you know, don't always trust the gauges or the graphing. That's just a quick look, but if you really want to know the value, you got to look over here to the left. So anyway, so as you can see, that wideband is going in and out. One thing you can see is, look what happened when that wideband went out over here. Even though I'm pretty close to my air fuel ratio, thankfully the tune was close, the wideband stopped trimming because you lost a wideband and it starts thinking, oh, I can't trust that. Look, it went way lean up here. Woo, baby, the good thing that thing didn't blow up. 0.89 lambda, so the tune was off a little bit at the higher RPM, but I didn't rev it that high in the other gear, so it's hard to say because we went all the way to 8,500. So it was leaning out up there, and the widebands had shut off because one of the widebands was not working. So that's a good recipe for a blow up right there. Not on a GT500, honestly. They're really durable in this way, especially on E85, but on a lesser engine, that could definitely cause you problems. Some other things to look at here are down here in this. Let's see if I can make that bigger. So right here in the magenta and yellow, this is clutch slip, right? So I'm always looking at this. I always look at this as a quick reference on clutch slip, and as I can see right here, I was getting this yellow line. See how So this is, let's see, first gear. Yeah. So first gear, then second gear didn't want to hold. See, this is second gear here. And it took a second for the clutch to grab, and then it started slipping at the top. So now I can go over here and say, all right, right at this spot, there's no clutch slip, pretty much 3. And then as it goes up, it's going to show you right here too. The reason I'm over here is it's also going to show you clutch pressure, right? So it was at 25 bar of pressure. Now this varies quite a bit on GT500s, and it's mostly, I think there's some room for improvement for the pump, the way the pump works, especially at higher RPM. We'll see how much I was getting here. Yeah, see right here at the bottom of third, I was getting 27 bar, and I've seen as high as 29 bar, and it's variable and different between cars. And that's just partly because we're pushing stock parts so far. There's going to be some variability. But things like this allow you, when you're graphing it, you can see this little spike here of yellow, and it was spinning right at the top of that gear. So it's a good thing I didn't try to go any higher than 8,300, because it probably would have just kept slipping and shut me down. And then all the other gears looked pretty good on this. And then you have your timing here. So out the back door, you know, it's mid to high 20s. And then, you know, what are all these dips? Well, on a DCT, it's pulling timing to make the shift. You cannot get rid of this, or else it won't shift, or it might shift sometimes. So if you see a DCT not shifting and banging off the limiter all the time on the shift, a lot of times this is disabled or softened up way too much. So anyway, let's take a break from that for a second, and I'm going to go over some of these comments. JMS says, should I throw the Diablo logging software in the garbage? Nah, I don't know. On anything newer, probably. I've used it. I use it on Hemi stuff, and it seemed to work okay. It's been a long time, though. I have an issue when I import a log. Only RPM PID works on the chart, but all channels that were logged pulled up. I'm not sure when you got here, Desmond, but hold on a second. Can't see the comments. There you go. I'm not sure when you got here, but I went over that earlier. If you don't have the OS ID set up correctly, or strategy or whatever, that sounds like maybe the route you're going. So I would, when we're done here tonight, go back and watch the beginning of that, and that might tell you. Jamie Holcomb, Pedro for president. What's up? Complicated is an understatement. Oh, I guess I was explaining something complicated. Going to try tomorrow. Been busy. When a coyote tensioner or guide starts to fail and the chain can slap a bit, does that mechanical issue show up on any channels in the data log? The only chance maybe is knock. You know, and things like false knock happen a lot, but it's almost become too common to blame all things you see on a knock sensor. Oh, that's false knock. It's false. It's like, and then they blow up, you know, because they're not paying attention to it. So you got to pay attention to that stuff. And any noise doesn't cause knock sensor issues, because the knock sensor is not listening all the time. It's only listening during a certain window on each cylinder. So it has to match with that. That's why exhaust causes it a lot, because it's transferring it right back to the cylinder head, whereas other parts of the motor, it may not hear it as well. Carl says, greetings from Detroit. Have people been able to get data logs on S650s when running the E-Mix on octane boost? Pros and cons. Hypothetically, what would you do for an NA650 build? I'm not sure if the Whipple cal is loggable with just like HP tuners. I think it is. But basically what they're doing with that is they're relying on the fuel trims to add that extra fuel back in that the tune is not adding in. So it works, obviously, but we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't even consider doing that if we continue. We would not even think about it. Juan says, had a question if torque source shows if transmission is slipping or blowing through torque converter. No, Torque source tells you, that's a good question. I didn't go over that, but that is one of the main things that you should always be logging, because torque source is going to tell you what's in control of the torque. We'll go over that real quick, actually. Now, one thing HP Tuners does, which usually works out well, not always, SCT does not do it, is HP Tuners decodes the source values. So in this case, Juan was talking about right here, torque source. If you look, so I'm on the two-step, it says driver demand. And then when I launch, it goes into a trans shift because it considers that a shift. Torque plus from trans, so as you can see here, it's pulling timing. Why is it doing that? Well, on a GT500, it's doing that to manage clutch slip, right? So it's targeting a certain amount of clutch slip to get the car moving, and it's the transmission is somewhat in control of that to help keep it not, keep the clutch happy. Now, you could say, well, why don't you get rid of that? It'll 60 foot like crazy. It's like you could, but then you have to get more pressure to the clutch. In this case, I'm at 21 bar, which is very high. This is probably a very good 60 foot, actually. At 20, if you can get 21 bar and 14 degrees of timing, man, this thing probably really rolled out. So sometimes it's a little battle to get all that correct. Anyway, back to torque source. Then after we're in gear, driver demand, right? What is driver demand? Driver demand is literally what your foot is doing. What is the driver demanding? That's what the table is called as to how much torque you want. On a car like this, driver demand is full throttle. If your pedal's wide open, the throttle's wide open. On other applications, it may use throttle to target a certain torque based on that table, and it does that part throttle, of course. But at watt's watt, and that's it. So if you keep going through it, right at the top of the gear, when you see it pull the timing, trans shift. One thing is, yeah, that says trans shift ... You can always fix that here by I'm going through this quick. You can figure it out on your own, I'm sure. Trans shift mod, right? So it's just modifying torque for the trans shift. So it just goes through that, drive demand, trans shift mod, driver demand. Sometimes you'll see if the clutch is slipping. I don't think it did that here. It didn't have time to realize it was slipping. But if the clutch is slipping in the middle, you might see a different torque source here. And then at the end, lift off the pedal, and then it goes to torque-based decel, which is basically in decel mode. That used to be called dash pod on earlier vehicles, and it's torque-based now, so it's torque-based decel. So I hope that answered your question. Let's see, what else? Would you guys ever do a small workshop on logging? All the channels and parameters can be super complex. Yeah, I would like to do that if there's a demand for it. I'm just not sure exactly how I would plan for that or structure it, or, I thought about making a members only section of YouTube, not to make money off of, but just to share that type of stuff just with our customers, kind of like a little bit of a members benefit. If you're tuned by us, you get in there, stuff like that. I'm not sure if that's possible. I'll have to think about that. Mendoza says, what's up? How you doing? John the Baptist, do I have any partners up in New Jersey area to get an X900S package installed and tuned on a 21 GT500? Depends on what part of Jersey. My brother, Carlos Sabrino, is up in North Jersey, and he does mostly repair, but he's a multi-time NMRA racer champion, super duper badass. So he could definitely do that for you, and I would have no problem with him doing that package for you. So we can work on that. All right, guys. So first off, I want to know if you guys have any questions. I didn't really have a specific plan coming into this, and hopefully what I've shown you so far is useful. I wanted to show you how to identify problems with your vehicle. The next thing I want to show, Northern Jersey. Yeah, Carlos Sabrino, which is our newest podcast. Oh, by the way, let me do a little bit of self-promotion here. For those of you guys that haven't seen, we've had Kelly Aiken on the podcast very recently, and then we just released Carlos Sabrino. We had a fairly new episode not long ago with Brian Heron, and then of course the ones that when I first started doing it last year and then took a break, Jerry and Brian Wolf. All those are really awesome interviews, not because of me, but because of the people, the information that's in there, the history that's in there. The reason that I'm doing the podcast is so you guys can get to know these people better. So they could be a little long, but the nice thing about it is, for those of you guys that don't realize, is it's a true podcast. You can get it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any podcast server that's out there. I'm sure we're on. And, like even for me, even though I was there, I like to listen to it just to kind of hear it from after the fact. So I just use Spotify. I get in my truck for the day and boom, it auto connects Android Auto and it plays 15 minutes of it or however long my drive is. And then on the way home, I hear another 15 minutes. And I just keep listening to it until it's gone, until it's done. And of course, I know you want to see our beautiful faces and YouTube works too. But it is nice to have the actual podcast support for that. So that's pretty cool. And we've got some really awesome people coming up. I don't want to even mention who we've got until after it's done. That way, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But I've got a lot of people, all lined up to come on. Some of them will be more towards the end of the year. They're timing it with coming to races and FL2K and Mod Nats and that kind of thing. I will tell you that we are for sure having Justin Young on for Mod Nats discussion. I'm not sure if we're going to do that soon or put it off a little bit closer to the race so we can talk about details of the race and what's going to happen this year. And I know there's been some changes to the classes and new classes and classes going away and all that. So we definitely want to have him on here to go over all that. Carl Chronic, where does somebody go to learn the basics of all this stuff? There are some good schools. I can't tell you if it's valuable from a dollar perspective, but they'll definitely teach you the basics. There's the tuning school, which is in Florida. I think both of the two are the two known tuning schools are in Florida. There's the tuning school, and they do well in teaching you this stuff. And I don't know the name of the other one. I've seen it at my Facebook ads. I was curious. I went and looked into it, and the person that's doing it is more of a GM guy, but seems to know enough to be teaching. And then that's specific. I think those are very specific to the software I'm talking about here. And then there's a next level, EFI University. I believe they're out in Arizona that does a more almost engineering level type tuning type training. And that's another good place to go. I've never been to any of those places. I've learned the hard way. But for somebody that wants to learn in that type of environment, those places work great. Craig says the interview with Carlos was great. Mark, fuel injector duty cycle, is that hard to set up? If so, can it be read? Oh, set up so it can be read. Gotcha. All right, so we'll talk about that real quick. I believe it's on this log. I don't know the math off the top of my head. You put me on the spot. But at the bottom here, you'll see injector pulse width, okay? And there's a maximum pulse width at any particular RPM. So, actually, give me a second here. Let me switch back to that camera. Let me look something up here. There it is. Okay, so I did this sheet a while back, and you would basically take the math I'm doing here and then use your pulse width that you're logging and create what's called the math channel. So for instance, at 7,000 RPM, we'll do 8,000. 8,000 RPM, the maximum pulse width of the injector is roughly 15 milliseconds. According to this, I believe it's correct. I did it. So now that was at 8,000 RPM. Now, if I go over here to 8,000 RPM and I go to injector pulse width, I'm not sure that's right. Oh, that's where it leaned out real bad. Let's go to 8,000 RPM over here. Something weird happened there. Pulse width dropped really hard. Let's look into that. That's 2 years ago, though. All right. So anyway, if we look here, it's at 13.8 milliseconds. So what is that? 13.8 divided by 15. That's a lot of duty cycle. So I'm at 92% duty cycle. Now, obviously, you don't want to go through there and scrub through there and do this math every single time. So you can do the math to figure all that out. You can find that math online. And then what you would do is you would create what's called a math channel. So up here, you go to math parameters. There might be one in here for duty cycle, actually. Yeah, injector duty cycle. So you need injector pulse width, which we have, and engine speed. Yeah, so see how this says injector pulse width? We got both of those. So it's a math channel, but it actually looks like it would work. I don't think you can add it after the fact. I don't know. That's a good question. It's got to be. There should be a way to add it, but it looks like, they already have it in here. I just don't have it. Go to math parameters, fuel flow, injector duty cycle. So you would add that as a, I wish you can, it's got to be a way you can add it here, I would think, since it's just a math channel. I'm not sure, but anyway, you can set that up to log how you wanted to, and that would tell you the duty cycle, but you have to be logging injector pulse width and RPM, and then you're set. HP Tuner's on top of it. Billy Jack, Ken, are you guys going to the NMRA Ohio event? No, I am not. I don't really plan on any more NMRA events for any time soon. If not, that's funny. What up, Walter? PBD in the house. How's it going? I keep forgetting to change that camera. All right, guys. Do you have any more questions? I'm going to go back to show you some more logs, but if you have any specific questions, now would be the time. So I'm not trying to track the comments. So let me know. All right. So I want to show you another log here, and then we'll go over an SCT log because I want to show you guys how to navigate LiveLink a little bit. It's a little tricky sometimes. Let's see. So what is this log? This is actually a roll hit on a 10-speed car. So now, as you can see right there, we don't normally allow the knock sensors to add timing, but in this case, we're not in boost yet, so it's adding timing as we're rolling before we go wide open. And you can see right here in the middle, you can see pedal and throttle right above where the cursor is, which makes it, I got the wrong screen on. There we go. So right there in the middle, you can see pedal and throttle, and it's not wide open yet, just rolling, rolling, rolling. And then right there, we're at what? And this might have been an older tune because it's still adding a little bit of timing, and we're in boost. Barely, though. It's only 1.04 load. That might be why. But one thing you'll notice, and this thing was running some boost, 2.6 load, shifted a little short there at 7,000, and then boom. Now, this is a good graphical representation of uh, you see knock, and this is per cylinder. So each cylinder is just a little bit different. Now, I believe it gets pretty bad on this log. It gets all the way down. See, and it's going up and up and up, but then boom, it turns back around the other way. So realistically, was it really knocking? It's hard to say. The fact it was showing knock on all cylinders equally, and then boom, it instantly turned back around at the higher RPM, and it didn't knock in the other gears. You know, it's hard to say. Very, very hard to say. And this is one of the hard parts about tuning. You have to decide if you're going to pay attention to that or what. It's not showing air temps there, but air temp here, you know, it's 130, 140, 150, 160. There's a lot of boost, air-to-air intercooler. So, you know, it could have been real. So these are all the things that you got to take a look at. You know, I would say it probably was a little bit of real knock. And so in that case, it's a good thing that we had knock sensors. You know, other things you can look at here is this particular car was trimming fairly rich, -7, -6, -7, and then boom. Not bad, but you know, if you wanted to optimize this tune, we'd probably pull just a little bit of fuel out of it so the trims are a little bit closer, pull a little bit of timing out of it, and then, you know, go from there. One thing we could do is possibly get more aggressive with the timing retard for temps, right? Because it wasn't knocking at the lower RPM or at the lower gears, but then it started knocking up top, and that was probably because it was getting hotter, and the timing retard for temps wasn't pulling timing at a fast enough rate. One other important thing I want to bring up that we didn't talk about yet is how many things you're logging. And I told you guys this earlier, but this is a perfect example of it. Let's see. I assume it's okay. So like this was logged at a track, obviously, or on the street or somewhere, but we're logging all this idle shit and all kinds of stuff we don't need to be logging. All these 0 through 13 map points. That would only be if the car had IMRCs. There's a ton of stuff in here being logged that doesn't need to be logged. And what happens is, like I told you, the more you log, the less resolution you get. So in this case, we're getting worse data for zero good reasons because we should delete some of that stuff. So a lot of the time what I do, and you could do this yourself, we're going to come out with a little bit more organized channels catalog that we can get to you guys. But in general, here's why this is logging so much, and here's how I handle it personally. Is I usually have a channels file like this that has a ton of shit on it. So if I'm logging for the first time on a new combo, it has most of what I need on there. But it may not be logging at the rate I need it to log, but it's going to catch it, right? So if I'm just logging to like wondering if something's going on, then I want to log a lot of things. Now, when I decide, okay, I'm having a fueling problem, then I can go in and delete a lot of stuff, like all shift solenoid stuff, you know, anything with the transmission, just to get fueling right. So I'll have multiple channels files. Like for GT500, I probably have like 5 or 6. You know, the one I showed you earlier is just like the catch-all big one. And then I'll have one that's real specific when I'm troubleshooting specific things, so it updates fast. So here you can see trans output shaft RPM, which is an important thing to log. See it? See how the number's going up? 2687, 3095, right? There's no update between those two. And it does that the whole way. So like in this gear, from the lowest part of the gear, it updates once, twice, not even. I got past that, the shift point. So it's only updating once or twice per gear. So it's just not all that useful if you actually need that. And in this case, it's good to know. So a better solution here on this particular car before we went out and logged it on this is to delete, either put a different channels file in it that has way less stuff that you know for sure you don't, who cares about idle stuff here? We definitely never, ever, ever, ever need 0 through 13. So there's 14 things that need to go. And when you delete all this stuff, now all of a sudden you'll get a nice clean trace on your output shaft speed sensor. Now, one thing to remember is it depends on the parameter. They update differently depending on details we're not going to go over. But as I scrubbed through this, you saw output shaft speed only updated once throughout the gear. Well, look at the RPM. It's updating every 15 or 20 RPM because that's obviously a huge priority for the engine. So that's updating more often in the routine. All right, guys. Simon's barking at somebody. Let's see. I want to go over some of the SCT stuff. More so how to quick and easy ways to look and manipulate the log. So now we looked at this earlier. Let's see. So one thing I do is, see, I'm not even doing this right. Well, first off, whenever you highlight one of the parameters here in SCT, it makes it bold. But the easiest thing to do is highlight what you want, the main thing, which is always going to be RPM probably. So highlight RPM, and then you hit minus down here at the bottom. Ah, shit. There you go. Sorry, guys. So you got RPM here. So when you highlight different things, you can see it better, as you can see as I switch through there. But this is the way I do it. Click RPM, then hit minus. So now the only thing you have up there is RPM, and it's easier to find things in the log, right? So this actually has two things on. So now, right now, the green is RPM. See how much easier that is to look at? This is a Turbo 400 mid 8-second car, and it launched at 3,000 RPM. Converter flared to 6100. 1-2 shift point 82, 2-3 81, and then just went out the back door. So we're going to look at the same thing on this log as we look on everything else, right? So air fuel is a little bit lean at the top. This is a race car, but right there it's a little lean, right? 0.84 lambda. It's not. That's pretty lean, actually. We're probably looking for 7.9, 8.0 lambda on this, 8.1 lambda. And then you can also look at the short-term fuel trims, which on this setup, now this one's not logging all that many things because it helps things speed up. But, so the fuel trim here, this thing needs a little touch-up because it's adding 2%, and then, and I don't know what log this is. There's a good chance this was already fixed. And then right here, it's adding 4%, and we're still at A2 lambda on that bank. Same thing, 4 or 5%, 6%. But overall, it's not bad. I don't believe this car. Yeah, it's got knock sensors, but we don't allow it to add knock. It looks like, I don't know what that little negative amount is there. And this car has lock cam, so there's not a lot to look at. The other real important thing to look at on this one is throttle angle actual, right? So there's your orange. Right here, he's at watt on the two-step. Let's go with the button. Never, ever, ever closes, and we're good. So, that's probably the most important thing to look at on any of these logs, right? You got to look at your RPM to find out where you're at. You got to look at, make sure you're full throttle, make sure your air fuel looks good, make sure it's not adding fuel, make sure you don't have any sort of excessive persistent knock. Persistent, I guess, would be the best word. If you see one little bit of knock and then you log it 3 more times and it's not there, that's nothing to worry about probably, unless it's like a huge amount. But if it's a huge amount and then it's not there and then it's there, that could be all sorts of things. But that would lead me to believe you have like a false knock where it's just something's hitting once in a while. Anyway, see what else we got here. Dowdy performance. It's kind of outdated. It's just, if you really want, we can offer you a good deal on getting an RTD if you want to switch to something that we're using more supporting daily. Unfortunately, the UCal thing just didn't work out super well for us. Can you use an SCT X4 as a boost IAT gauge for a boosted TVS Gen 1? Yeah. So I'll go back to this right here. You can see on this log, see how it has analog input 1. I think he might log with, I think it is as SCT. I didn't think there was that many analog inputs. I guess it does. But what you do is, those IAT is a little bit more difficult because the way an IAT sensor works, but you can definitely log pressure super easy. You just have to have an analog input cable for the SCT device and then wire it in correctly. And then once you wire it in correctly, I'm not sure if this car has any of that. He might have some stuff wired in. Once you wire it in correctly, it's just going to show you the raw voltage values. And then within the software, you can configure to convert it into the actual value. So like when you're doing that sort of stuff, a map sensor is going to be 0 to 5 volt, and 1 volt equals 5 pounds of boost, 2 volts equals 10 pounds, or whatever that is. You have to enter that formula in, and then it will show you. And then that's the easiest way to bring external sensors into SCT up to a certain point. You do the same thing with HP tuners. HP tuners is a little bit more advanced in that way, and they have CAN inputs, and like you can hook you wouldn't need to do this on a Coyote because we have widebands, but you can hook like an AEM wideband directly in, and it's CAN based, which CAN basically means it's network digital based instead of just a voltage signal. Does cam angle change depending on what intake manifold for Coyote NA? Thanks. Not exactly. It depends. So one thing I've noticed is, well, first off, most of the intakes out there aren't all that different that it would require that. The biggest change you're going to have related to an intake manifold could be related to trying to get rid of an intake resonance where you're trying to make up for that. We don't really seem to have a lot of that on the intakes that we use now. But if you have like a bad spot in intake, moving the cam around on one intake versus another intake might gain you something. But the other thing is like when you're talking about custom intakes, you get into the situation of like, well, I tried all these cam positions on this intake and then nothing, it didn't help. And then you put a different intake on and you don't revisit that. Well, maybe you should, especially if it's a custom intake that you haven't used before with that runner length, because the cam test that you did prior, there may have been, the intake may have not shown the benefit of the cam timing because there just wasn't enough airflow at that RPM point. Then once you get the airflow that you need at that RPM point, the cam timing change will make a difference. And I've talked about this before when you're testing products, and that's one of the biggest pitfalls you can run into is every part doesn't stand on its own, right? It's all part of a puzzle. So you can get into the point where you're testing an intake manifold, but an exhaust is limiting the car so much that no matter what you do with that intake manifold, you won't see a change. But once you change the exhaust, now all of a sudden those intake manifolds will show a difference between the two because you can operate it at a higher RPM level. Mr. Car Addict, what's up? How's it going? He's got a great channel. He does all kinds of car stuff. He's got a Viper and a new C7 Z06, I think. A couple other cars. I think he got a TRX. He's got all kinds of cool stuff. All right, guys. What time is it? Ooh, man, it's 9:30 already. Thanks for those of you guys that have stuck around. I know this one's been a little boring unless you're really interested in the topic, but I think it's important. And, I'm not doing this to be popular. doing this to be helpful to you guys, right? And I would love to sit here and be entertainment for hundreds and hundreds of people all at once. But I'm more interested in trying to help you guys learn. And, you know, if we can do it in a fun way, we'll do that. But data logging is really not fun, and it's hard to make that fun. So hope you guys, you know, got some use out of this. I'm going to wrap it up soon. We're an hour and a half in roughly. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask. I will ask you guys, as always, to subscribe to the channel. I would assume that most of you guys that are here at this point are subscribed. But then again, you know, you might be watching this after the fact. If you are watching this after the fact, shame on you. You should be watching it live so you can participate and ask questions and all those sorts of things. I was even thinking about maybe doing some giveaways only during the live part, you know, to make it a little bit more fun and get, you know, some more people in here, things like that. But, you know, any ideas that you guys have for the show, I'd really appreciate it. Again, of course, you've got the podcast. We're trying to do a ton of those. If you know anybody you think might be good on the podcast, send them my way. But, you know, don't just send anybody my way, because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But, you know, it's got to be something relevant to performance, a racer, industry person, company person, anything like that. Somebody with an interesting story and things, you know, we can talk about that you guys want to hear about. I'm really, really enjoying that, the podcast, and it seems like a lot of people are. I'd like to get some more numbers on that unit, but that's just going to take some time. So that's about it there. And then let's see, what else do we got coming up? You know, we're headed into the summer. It's getting hot down here already. We'll probably be doing a track rental here real soon, with anybody that wants to hit the track one last time before it gets really, really crappy here. And then we're going to be getting prepared for the year-end swing during the summer, which is for Florida, is Mod Nats and FL2K. I'm really excited about Mod Nats and FL2K this year. I'm hoping to have some special guests along with us to some of the races. I'm still working on that, so I'm not going to tell you too much about that. But maybe some people that you don't see at those races normally will be showing up. And Mod Nats is supposedly doing like an S650 category, which I think will be really cool to see. And, you know, hopefully it's just a little bit of everything, which would be really cool. Billy Jack, hell yeah. Thanks, brother. Call, no problem. I appreciate it. Really hope you guys enjoyed the show. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Make sure you go watch the podcasts. Subscribe on Apple and Spotify and all that. That helps them serve more and more people that don't know about the podcast, you know, puts it on their feed or whatever. The more you can do that, the more it helps me out, the more we can do more podcasts and cool shit like that. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.